There are two purposes for tonight's meeting. First, to provide the public with information, and second, to receive the public's comments on the Navy's proposal and the draft environmental analysis. So this is our first meeting in Hawaii. We'll be holding 3 additional meetings, one tomorrow on Maui, then Kauai, and finally Thursday on the Big Island at Hilo. And we'll also be holding a meeting in San Diego next Monday. So the Navy's prepared a short presentation, and then we'll be accepting verbal comments right after. Here tonight to receive your comments are Captain Johnson from the United States Navy and Mr. Alex Stone, the EIS Program Manager for the United States Pacific Fleet. My role is to ensure that we have a fair and orderly meeting where you have an opportunity to make a comment on the draft EIS. So tonight's presentation and the verbal comments are being transcribed for the administrative record by Cynthia, seated to my left. And so that we ask that the Navy presenters and the people providing verbal comments are not to be interrupted so that their testimony can be accurately transcribed. At this time, I'd like to introduce Captain Johnson.
Thank you, Allison. Aloha, kako.
Aloha.
Thank you. I appreciate you allowing us to speak with you this evening. Hopefully it isn't going to bother everybody. It's kind of a small group. If I don't stand behind the podium, I feel like I'm stuck back here. So I am blessed to, one, be stationed here in Hawaii, but I'm doubly blessed to live on Kauai. So one thing I've learned when I've been in meetings like this is that the importance of treating everyone with aloha and respect. And I know there may be some people in here that disagree with how we're going about things and the reason for all of this. So I just ask that you keep that in mind. But thank you very much. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission, the Navy's mission, the military's mission, and why it's important, and why we need to do this mission. And the mission that I'll be talking about is testing and training. And then we have a lot of experts here in the room that are going to talk to you about the specifics about policy acts, the law, and then I have biologists and other people I'll be able to really get down if you have really technical questions about what's going on. Next slide. So this is our mission. Bottom line is I'm stationed at the Pacific Missile Range, which is on the west side of Kauai, or as my son likes to say, it's the last stop that Santa Claus makes in the United States. And what is the reason? There's no reason to have a military presence in Hawaii or in Kauai unless we're doing something that allows us to be a steward of the nation's security. So what we do is, so to be a steward of the security, of the nation's security, how we do that is we do 2 things. We test.
Sorry, Captain.
Do you need me to?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Recording thing.
I can either talk louder. We test and we train. So in almost equal amounts. So if you talk to my boss, who's Admiral Swift at Pacific Fleet, and then there's also Admiral Harris at PACOM. So Admiral Harris says we have to be ready to fight tonight or be prepared for anything. My boss, Admiral Swift, talks about being ready, manned, trained, and equipped for the right fight at the right time at the right moment. And we do that by 2 ways. The first way we do it is by training. And when we train, especially for the Navy, we go forward, we deploy ahead, away from here. If we are to have some sort of engagement with another country or anything like that in the future, we don't want to do it in our homelands. So we need to train and prepare for them so they're ready for those. On the other side of it is we need to keep putting technologies and capabilities in their hands that allow them to do their job as efficiently and as safely for them as possible. So next slide, please. This is the proposed action. So what you're going to see here is, and I've only been here for about 1.5 years. I got here a little less than 1.5 years. But the environmental impact statement that we're doing looks, for the most part, very similar to the ones that you've seen in the past. The scope of our activities, what we do, the testing and training, pretty much the amount of testing and training that we're doing is, it's pretty much in line with what we have seen historically and what we plan on doing in the future. Next slide. The study area, part of it that we won't talk about today is in Southern California. The part that we'll be talking about and hopefully allowing you to comment on is for the Hawaiian side of it. The Hawaiian, I'm just going to step, I'll talk louder, I promise, but I'm going to step over here. So what you see, this is our Hawaiian, this is the temporary operating, this is the Hawaiian training area that we talk. It encompasses pretty much most of the main Hawaiian islands, and, back up here. And then the temporary operating area was when we do a lot of our testing that involves like activities like a missile shooting that. This is 2.1 million square miles, so it isn't like we're driving around operating in that area all the time. The Hawaiian op area we have, that encompasses warning and training areas both to the north of the islands and to the south of the islands. And then specifically we talk about like a Joint Base Pearl Harbor, and then where we are in Kauai, which is the Pacific Missile Range. Next slide, please. So this is just a scope of some of the activities you have, and it could be everything from a war in the most, what you think about in a book or a novel or in a movie, or World War I, World War II, large-scale conflicts, to homeland defense, maritime security, humanitarian assistance and disaster response is a big thing, anti-piracy operations, and I have that in disaster relief. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I know is a hot topic is in the Pacific Missile Range, and these are slides that PAC Fleet puts up. When I talk specifically about the Pacific Missile Range, it starts at 15,000 feet under the water, and it goes all the way to space. So we do things from underwater, we test underwater, we test surface and train, air and space. One of the topics I know that comes up is the use of active sonar. So sonar is a tool. There's both passive sonar, which are basically just microphones, they just listen, and then there's active sonar. And just like any tool, you need the right tool for the right job. So when we talk about active sonar, I think there's a lot of discussion. I think there's a lot of people here that can learn about what we mean when we say we're going to be using active sonar, or how we're going to use it, or why we even use it. And I'm more than happy to answer and field your questions about that as we go through the evening. Next slide. And I talked about the range complex. So the Hawaiian operating area is what you see. I think if you go to the next slide, here's the map that I was looking for. So this is the Hawaiian operating area. And what you see, the large blue areas are warning areas. And that's where we do our training. And a warning area is just, it's actually, that's an aircraft term. It just warns people that there's training going on. So before you go flying through it, you should take a look at what's, make sure that you're not going to run through an exercise or an event that's going on. It's a very large bit of land. When you look north of Kauai, that the warning area, the Whiskey 188, that area there, and that's an area that the Pacific Missile Range controls on a day-to-day basis, is half the size of the state of Texas. And then you see similar areas to the south. As you go further, some of the areas that are outlined in the very bottom of the screen, those are just mostly just for air training. So they're parsed out for submarine, some for surface, and some for air. Now, when you saw that larger area, like I said, that's 2.1 million nautical square miles. So that goes to all the way out past Midway Island, or it actually goes to the international date line, and then it goes north approaching the Aleutian Islands. And like I said, we do this environmental impact study to have the ability to know that we can safely, efficiently be good stewards of the environment, operate there and conduct testing and training there. But it isn't, the whole area isn't open all the time. We design specific tests for specific times, specific dates, and that. Next slide. And then environmental stewardship programs. So when I said why we're here, we're stewards of the nation's security. I firmly believe that we can also be stewards of our natural resources, our cultural resources, and if you come to Kauai, you'll hear me talk about being a good steward of the community as well, which is one of the reasons that we're speaking to you tonight. Aside from everything that you see that happens, this is mostly seaward. We do a lot of things landward. We have a lot of initiatives, and there's specific pictures there of monk seals, the turtles, and that we definitely try to have a light footprint as possible. We try to be as responsible as we are. One of the things I've learned in my short time here in Hawaii is that the 2 words when I check in my new sailors that I've learned from living here is, one, you need to be pono, which is you have to be a good person, you have to be right, you have to, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And the other one that's just come across in a lot of times, and I've seen it many times, is malama, which is, of course, it's a word, it's a stewardship, and so we're definitely try to be responsible and good stewards of everything we do. Next slide. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Stephan.
Thank you, Captain, and thanks for being here. We really appreciate your interest in the project and for coming out. It's a pleasure for us to be able to come out and talk about the training and testing that the captain talked about and the environmental stewardship and environmental program that I'm going to talk about here tonight. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Alex Stone. I'm the project manager for the environmental impact statement. I am not a local. I'm actually from California, but I have been doing environmental planning for the ranges in Hawaii for a number of years, and I was the project manager for the EIS last time. I am up here talking, but I am representing a large team, the team of folks that you see around the room. So I would, this is going to be kind of a short presentation that's going to cover kind of the overview, but I would, like the captain said, I'd encourage you to go and talk to the people after the presentation about any questions that come up during my comments or anything else. We think this is a great format to have your questions answered, and we have all of the different experts that are part of the project here at the poster session. So please take advantage of that. And the videos, as well as the EIS document itself and materials that are on our website. So again, our purpose for being here is to provide kind of an overview and to get your comments on the EIS. And we'll talk more specifically about how you can comment, but you can comment tonight or through the 12th of December, which is when the comment period closes on the EIS. So with that, next slide. I'm going to talk, these are the things I'm going to talk about. The purpose, the captain kind of talked about the EIS, the activities. I'll go a little bit more specifically about why are we doing an EIS, why are we here tonight, why are we doing this EIS right now. I'll talk about environmental compliance, kind of how this EIS relates to the other associated regulatory processes that we're looking at as part of this. I'll kind of give a quick overview of the results that are in the draft EIS, the environmental impact analysis that is contained in the EIS. I'll kind of give you the highlights of that and the areas that we looked at. I'll spend some time on our mitigation measures, which is something that I think we're most proud of. This is the idea that wherever we see an environmental impact associated with our activities, we work really hard to develop a measure where we minimize the environmental impact to the extent that we can while still performing that testing and training mission. So I'll talk kind of specifically about what are some of those measures we do. And then I'll talk about the process, kind of where we are in the process, what comes next after tonight is over, what are we going to do with your comments, what's kind of the next step and the timeline overall. So with that, let's dive kind of into this. The purpose of the EIS, why are we doing the EIS? It kind of breaks down into sort of 3 different areas. The first one is we operate under a permit issued by our partners, the National Marine Fisheries Service, under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that permit is issued for a 5-year period. So we're currently operating under a permit that was issued in 2013, and that expires in December of 2018. So one of the reasons we're doing the EIS is to support the issuance of that permit and other processes, other regulatory processes. But that's kind of one of the drivers. And so the second thing is because we're doing this new EIS and because the Navy is always evolving in our techniques and the way we train as well as new technology, the fact that we're doing this new EIS allows us to study the changes. So we're always constantly changing. Although I would say that the general types of activities that we're concerned about the environmental impacts are very similar to activities that we've been doing in the Hawaiian Islands in the areas that Captain described for many decades. But there are always new changes, like new types of aircraft, a new training system, a new way of training, and the EIS allows us to study the environmental impacts of those changes. And the other point about the new EIS is science and what we know about impacts from our activities are constantly evolving. So the new EIS allows us to bring in the most recent scientific information on environmental impacts as well as just the environment, what species are out there. So it allows us to kind of refresh the science as it evolves over time. So these are the reasons we're doing the EIS. Next. So I mentioned that the EIS, the environmental impact statement, a good way to, a sort of image we like to use is the EIS is kind of the umbrella, and underneath that umbrella through the EIS process we look at compliance with other laws. And so these are the ones that I won't go through each one, but through the EIS we look at these other laws, and we work very closely with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and I hope you get a chance to meet. We have a member, somebody from the National Marine Fisheries Service at one of our poster stations, and they're a really key partner with the Navy. As well as being a regulatory agency, they help us with the science, they help us with the mitigation measures, and they're a cooperating agency on the EIS, and they're here tonight. But the EIS, through the EIS, we do compliance with all these different laws, and each of these has kind of a different process, but it's all completed with the EIS. So, next. The EIS is kind of a comprehensive look at all of the different impacts associated with the testing and training. The activities that are really probably the focus, but not the only activities we look at, are impacts associated with sonar, the energy from putting sound in the water, and explosives. Those are kind of the two areas that are what we call stressors, the two primary stressors that we study in the EIS. And we look at the impact of those activities and others on all the different types of resources, and you can see they're listed here. A lot of the focus, as you might imagine, because the focus is in water, is on marine mammals, but we look at other, as you can see here, we look at other resources, from cultural resources to air quality, coastal, all these types of things are looked at in the EIS. So kind of gives you a short overview of the different topic areas. One of the main factors, one of the main things we're looking at is how energy from Navy testing and training, how it impacts marine resources. And to do that, the Navy has developed a model that we use across the entire Navy that does an excellent job about propagating energy and showing how the energy moves through the water. And then we look at the science, we look at the resources that could be impacted in that area. And that's how we reach the impact conclusions. We use this model, and the model's been, we spent a lot of time developing the model and validating it with people, and it's a Navy-wide program that we're using. Next. So kind of the impact on species that the EIS finds, and again, this is the draft EIS. This is not the end of the process, but this is the draft EIS, which is out for a review that we're looking for comments on. But the EIS shows that we do have impacts on individual animals. The vast majority of the impacts to marine mammals are temporary behavioral changes. Those are the largest number of impacts. There are impacts that could be more severe, but those we think are where our mitigation measures are most effective, and I'll talk about the mitigation measures. But for marine mammals, the vast majority of the impacts are temporary changes in behavior. Next slide. Now to the mitigation measures, the part I think that I'm most excited about, and part of the ones that we're most proud of is, again, like I said earlier, we take a look at any type of activity where there may be an impact, and we try and develop a mitigation measure that will reduce the impact. The mitigation measures have to be effective and be able to be done at the same time the Navy is testing and training. So not every mitigation works for an actual Navy warship. But we've over time and across the Navy developed a suite of mitigation measures that are specific to the individual activities and really are effective at minimizing impacts. Some of the ones kind of, the general concept for the mitigation measures is for activities that could have an impact like sonar and explosives, where we're most concerned about the impact is closest to the explosion or sonar, and we've established safety zones in those areas. So if we detect marine mammals in those safety zones, we either, for explosives, we delay doing the testing or training event, or for sonar, we'll power down the sonar or shut down the sonar. And these are the mitigation measures. And we have trained our crew, the people that are out there doing the training, to implement these mitigation measures. And we make sure that our lookouts are highly trained so they're able to spot marine mammals, and that we have a system in place to make sure these mitigation measures are effective while the Navy is training. So we really believe that the mitigation measures strike the balance between protecting the environment at the same time we're allowing the training to be able to be performed. One of the additional things that is a feature of this EIS is mitigation measures that are specific to certain areas and times of year. And I think I have a slide on that. I think we'll go to the next one. So this is an example around the Hawaiian Islands of mitigation measures that are specific to certain areas where the science has identified are important to certain species, and where the Navy is proposing to limit to various types of limitations on the training in these areas. You can see the ones that are talked about, like the Hawaiian humpback area and the area around the Big Island. And these are described in detail in the EIS, and the poster station here we can kind of describe more specifically, but this shows specific areas where the Navy is proposing geographic mitigation measures. Next slide. A bit about the NEPA process. The NEPA process, one of the key things of the NEPA process is public involvement. Before the Navy makes a final decision, we consider not just the environmental impacts of our study, but the comments that were received on the environmental impact statement and our analysis. So it's a key part of NEPA is the public involvement. So where the public is involved is the scoping period that we did in 2015. And that was where we took input on what we should look at in the EIS, and now we've come back with the draft EIS based on the scoping comments, and the EIS is out for review right now, as I mentioned, through the 12th of December. We'll take all the comments that we received during the public review period of the draft EIS, and we'll develop a final EIS where we'll look at all of those comments, we'll update the analysis, we'll respond to comments that were received on the draft EIS, and we'll publish a final EIS so you can kind of see how comments that were received on the draft EIS were considered. And after that, we'll put out the final EIS, and then after a wait period, the Navy would issue a record of decision. And again, we're shooting for the end of 2018 to be completed prior to the expiration of the current permit in December 2018. Next slide. So how you can comment? You can comment tonight. We're gonna turn around the podium here so we can take your comment here verbally. You can also fill out a comment form. You can also mail us a comment to the address here, or you can fill out our website. You're able to make a comment on the website. Again, the date is the 12th of December, as I think I've said several times. We're on somewhat of a timeline because we need to complete the EIS process and all the other associated regulatory processes by the end of 2018. So with that, again, I want to thank you for being here, and we welcome your comments, but you don't have to make a comment now. You can come talk to us later or provide a comment on the website or any other way. So again, thanks for being here.